Hey, what's up YouTube? Lightsaber Samurai here, and I'm back again for another video. And this was a response, and this video was inspired by JLove81 and Dr. Josh the Real Gamer. And in their videos, they went over some of their top sports games of all time. And so I thought I would go ahead and take my own spin on it. Now, I'm gonna do my top 5, and not all of these are gonna be what we call traditional sports games. So with that being said, my top 5 favorite sports games, let's talk about it. Okay, so the first game I've got here, and we are going to the original Xbox for this one. This was released in 2002, and it was released by Ubisoft, and this is, of course, Death Throw Underground Team Combat on the original Xbox. In this game, it is a no-holds-barred 5v5 game where your objective is to score points by throwing a disc inside the goal. Simple enough, but the issue with that is if you get defended by an opposing team member, like I said, anything goes. They use weapons. You can grapple opponents and throw them down. You can stomp them out. You can just, punch and kick combos. This game is very bloody and it's very violent, and I almost wish this game would be a thing in real life. But then, of course, people might get seriously hurt and or die. So maybe I don't really wish this is a real life game. But in this is a very fun game. You've got teams with names like the Marines and the Nuke Heads and the Crushers and the Sea Cats. And it takes place in what appears to be a post-apocalyptic future. And they battle for supremacy by throwing this disc. And like there's a story mode, a tournament mode. Of course, there's a classic 2-player. Actually, it's 1 to 4 players. So this is one of the few games that takes advantage of all 4 of the original Xbox's control ports. So you can get a party and a night to remember, just all of your friends just going head-to-head 4v4 on this split screen 4 ways and just battle it out. This is a fantastic game, and one I wish I had heard about back in the day. It was released, like I said, in 2002 to pretty much crappy reviews and things like that. But if you see this game is dirt cheap, and one that might be expensive in the future because it was only released on the original Xbox. So that is Death Throw. If you see it, definitely pick it up. Alrighty, another one of my favorite games, and let's stick with the original Xbox with this. In the early 2000s and the late 90s, I was a huge fan of extreme sports, and that's snowboarding, skateboarding, rollerblading, BMX, all of that stuff. The X Games was something me and my brothers, we watched every summer, and a lot of our favorite heroes like Shaun White and Matt Hoffman and Tony Hawk and all those guys were shredding it up. Without a doubt, the most successful game to come out of that whole craze was Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, but I wanted to shine some light on Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2X, again on the original Xbox. Now, I was exposed to Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 on the original PlayStation back in 1999 or so, 99, 2000, somewhere around there, but this game is the definitive version of that game. It has courses from Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2. You've got the 6th generation makeover with the most robust system of the 6th generation. The graphics look fantastic in this. In this game, you play as Tony Hawk or Bob Burnquist or a lot of the other famous professional skaters at the time, and you would go through these arenas and complete challenges like high score challenges and spell and skate and finding secret objects and things like that. And it was the tried and true formula before they started to branch off and kind of do a bunch of weird stuff. But this is one of the last great Tony Hawks alongside Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3. But like I said, compared to the original PlayStation and the Dreamcast version, the Dreamcast, I'm not a huge fan of the controller, so I prefer to play it on this using the S controller. And like I said, it plays great, it runs smooth, and like I said, this is definitely the definitive version, and like I said, one that I got this copy for $5 and it doesn't go for that much more now, so definitely worth adding to your library. Alrighty, and for this next title, what I want to do is go back, way back, all the way back to the days of the Neo Geo AES, and by far the greatest golf game of all time till this day is Neo Turf Masters on the Neo Geo. Unfortunately, I don't have an AES or a Neo Geo CD, but you can play this game on the SNK Arcade Classics Volume 1 On the Wii, the PlayStation 2, and the PSP, I'm showing the Wii version here as I think this version of this game runs the best. But Neo Turf Masters, I mean, it's a game that in its day had fantastic graphics. The Neo Geo touches as far as like the arcade aesthetic were spot on, very charming. Everything from the announcer to the animations when you get a birdie or a bogey, and they've got 4 fantastic tracks and a handful of different players you can play as. The music's fantastic. Everything about this game is superb, and it's also a great game that you can pick up and play for 5 minutes and kind of put down, which is a common theme and one thing that I like about all of these games on this list today. But like I said, till this day, there hasn't been a game that's come close. A couple of the Outlaw golf games have gotten pretty close, but like I said, as far as I'm concerned, Neo Turf Masters stands alone. So however you can play this game, if you're lucky enough to have any of the SNK hardware, or if you can grab Neo Turf Masters on one of these compilations, what I was talking about, or emulate it, just play this game any way you can. You'll be glad you did. Okay, now moving on to the penultimate game on the list, and another sport that I am a huge fan of is combat sports, and in particular mixed martial arts. And in the 90s I was a huge fan of boxing and a huge fan of wrestling, but when I got exposed to MMA, I mean, it looked exactly like I thought you know, a real life fight would look. You think about movies back in the day like Jean-Claude Van Damme and Bloodsport, or like, you know, like some of the Karate Kid movies and things like that. MMA, I mean, it was real, you know, it was bloody, it was violent, it was fantastic, and I was a huge martial arts enthusiast growing up, and, you know, as a kid and in my early teens. So UFC and Pride Fighting Championships and all those other organizations, right up my alley. By far, in my opinion, the best representation of MMA on any platform in any game is UFC 3 Undisputed, and this, in my opinion, is the best game in the series for 2 words: Pride Mode. In this game, and this is the only one that did it, it had what was called Pride Mode, and Pride Fighting Championships, in my opinion, was the better of the 2 between Pride and UFC when Pride was around. Just the spectacle of it. It was kind of like watching the arcade version, but in real life. And like I said, just everything from the announcements to the walk-ins to the music, fantastic. And even the rules I prefer better than the unified rules of mixed martial arts, which is what the UFC and all organizations nowadays go by. But you switch it to Pride Mode, it takes you to the Pride Ring. You can use the arenas, the referee from Pride. It's even being called by Stephen Quadros and Boss Rutan. They pulled out of retirement to do this. The rules are the same as the Pride rules. You can stomp, soccer kick. It's got the Pride roster, and you can play as fan favorites like Mirko Cro Cop and Murilo Bustamante and Vanderlei Silva, and all of these guys in their prime. Fantastic. If you prefer the UFC, of course, it's got a robust UFC mode too, and a career mode where you can rise through the ranks with a fighter you create, and on your way to becoming UFC champion. The graphics hold up very well today. It moves fluid enough, and like I said, this by far is the best game in the series. I know people now are playing like UFC 2 and UFC 3 on the PS4 and the original Xbox, but you need to get your hands on Undisputed 3. Alrighty, and moving on to the last game on the list today, and we're going back to the original Xbox, and I wanted to end this video with a traditional sports game, because I was a huge fan of football in the 90s. I was a Cowboys fan, as basically the rest of the country was, and in my opinion, the best football game ever made on the original Xbox, ESPN NFL 2K5, and this was a game that was so good. In my opinion, it made Madden 05 look really bad. So bad, in fact, that it scared EA to the point where they bought the franchise and bought the rights to football. So basically, they could be the only ones to make licensed football games from that point forward. Everything in this game, from the presentation to the sound to the controls, everything was spot on. Of course, you know, the animations with the team celebrations and the interviews, everything in this game works to perfection, in my opinion. It's a game that still looks good today on the original Xbox and playing on modern televisions. you got to do yourself a favor. Most games like this, they lose their value very quickly, and this one is no exception. This one can be had for anywhere from like $1 to $5 pretty much anywhere you find it. You want the original Xbox version because it is the better playing between the Xbox and the PS2 version. The PS2 version were lacking in things like the instant replay, where it would just show stills of the instant replay, whereas on the original Xbox version you got, you know, the actual video clip. Not to mention that with the original Xbox you had your own thing, like you could play your own soundtrack, and you could cue soundtrack and music on your hard drive to play when you scored a touchdown. You can have a certain song play and things like that, so you can really tweak it and customize your experience just the way you like. So again, in my opinion, the greatest game of all time, ESPN 2K5. Alrighty guys, so that's gonna do it. So let's talk about it. Questions, comments, concerns, threats down below. What is your favorite sports game of all time? Like I said, I know a lot of guys are fans of the Madden and the 2K games, and although I'm not a huge fan of those nowadays, the 2K series started out on the Dreamcast and couldn't be denied at the time when it came out, and it killed a lot of franchises like Game Day and some of the other ones that were going around at the time. So like I said, tell me what's your favorite sports game. I want to give another shout out to JLove81 and Dr. Josh the Real Gamer for giving me the idea and the inspiration for this episode. I will leave links in the description below to their videos so you can go and check them out. Please tell them that the Lightsaber Samurai sent you. But without further ado, I do believe that's all I got for you. Lightsaber Samurai out. Peace.